Scharnhorst now lies off the North Cape of Norway, a memorial to the last battle ever fought between two capital ships using big guns alone. Only 36 of her 2,000-man crew survived, to be brought back to Britain as prisoners of war. Elsewhere, the Royal Navy also enjoyed success. In September 1943, its seamen watched the surrender of another enemy they had fought for more than 3 years. Admiral Andrew Cunningham, commander of the Mediterranean Fleet, proudly signalled the Admiralty in London, "Be pleased to inform His Majesty that the Italian fleet lies at anchor under the guns of the fortress of Malta." It had all been very different in June 1940, when Italian dictator Benito Mussolini had announced that his powerful fleet would drive the British out of Mare Nostrum, our sea. Cunningham's fleet had been severely weakened by the need to send ships to defend Britain, but he was determined to bring the Italian fleet to battle. However, a few inconclusive skirmishes were enough to persuade the Italian fleet that it would be safer to stay in port. Cunningham now looked to a new weapon. On the night of the 11th of November 1940, Swordfish aircraft from the carrier Illustrious took off to attack the Italian fleet base at Taranto. Charles Lamb was later interviewed by the BBC.
I thought, looking at this intense flak, watching the aircraft go in, that there would be no survivors other than ourselves in our role as of spectator. And on the way back from Taranto, said to my observer, Casey Grieve, that I thought we would have to make out a report of what had happened because nobody else would have got back. As it turned out, of course, we only lost 2.
3 of Italy's 6 battleships were crippled. 21 obsolete biplanes had rewritten the rules of naval warfare. From now on, air power would be critical. But this triumph only slightly eased Cunningham's other great concern, the defense of Malta. The island's position in the central Mediterranean placed it astride Italy's supply lines to its armies fighting the British in North Africa. Supply convoys to Malta came under constant Axis air attack from Libya and Sicily, and getting them through became one of the Royal Navy's most bitter campaigns of the war. The situation worsened when Churchill decided to send troops to Greece after Hitler intervened to help the Italians in North Africa and the Balkans. The Italian fleet sailed out to intercept the British convoys crossing from Egypt, but Cunningham was waiting. Aircraft from the carrier Formidable torpedoed the battleship Vittorio Veneto, though she managed to limp back to port. Then they crippled the cruiser Pola. The Italians sent ships to her aid. But Cunningham's fleet intercepted them south of Cape Matapan and sank 2 cruisers and 2 destroyers. The Germans swiftly overran the Balkans and then turned their attention on the island of Crete. On the 20th of May, they launched an airborne assault against the island. Within a week, the Royal Navy was having to evacuate the defenders while under fierce air attack by the Luftwaffe. One of the ships sunk was the cruiser HMS Gloucester. Only 84 of her crew survived the onslaught.
Eventually, they hit us with a salvo of bombs. Where the bombs landed, I was never sure. I know when it hit the bridge, and there were several hit the waist of the ship.
I felt somebody drag me up over the corner of the hatch, about a foot wide it was, because, you know, the very heavy armoured hatch dragged me through onto the Marine's mess deck. So then there were 3 more people we helped pull through, but they were dead. So we realised they were all drowned down below, so the only thing to do was to close the hatch.
Two other cruisers and 6 destroyers were also lost, but the Navy managed to bring 16,000 soldiers back to Egypt. The strain on the Royal Navy crews was constant.
We had very little sleep, and this went on and on and on.
The pressure became even greater when the Germans sent more U-boats to the Mediterranean. They dealt the Royal Navy a body blow, sinking first the carrier Ark Royal, which had until now led a charmed life, surviving 2 previous German claims that she had been sunk. 2 weeks later, on the 25th of November 1941, a U-boat accounted for the battleship Barham. But even worse was to come. On the night of the 18th of December 1941, Italian frogmen mounted on human torpedoes made an attack on the battleships Valiant and Queen Elizabeth in Alexandria Harbour. They attached magnetic charges to the hulls of both ships, crippling them. Cunningham had no serviceable battleships left, but the next morning he saluted the flag on the quarterdeck as usual, and the Italians never realized that they could use their remaining battleships against the Malta convoys. Instead, the Axis air offensive against the island was redoubled. This stopped the supply convoys from Alexandria. Malta seemed about to be starved into submission. In August 1942, Force H, based at Gibraltar, launched Operation Pedestal, a final desperate attempt to get supplies to the island. A convoy of 14 merchant vessels from Britain, escorted by 2 battleships, 4 aircraft carriers, 7 cruisers and 32 destroyers, entered the Mediterranean on the 10th. On the following day, a squadron of Spitfires from the carrier Furious flew to bolster the defenses of Malta. As they did so, a U-boat attacked the carrier Eagle and sank her with 4 torpedoes. On the 12th, the force came under sustained air attack again. This time, the aircraft carrier Indomitable had her flight deck wrecked. But amazingly, only 1 merchant ship had been lost. All that was to change. That evening, the main escort turned back to Gibraltar as planned, leaving 4 cruisers and 12 destroyers to take the merchant vessels on to Malta. No sooner had this happened than an Italian submarine torpedoed 2 of the cruisers and the tanker Ohio, which remained afloat. It was the start of an horrific night, as Italian and German torpedo boats joined in the action. The 3rd cruiser was sunk, the 4th had to be scuttled, and 4 of the merchant ships were destroyed. 5 more merchant ships were sunk by air attack once daylight came. By evening, only 3 freighters survived. They were greeted jubilantly as they reached Valletta's Grand Harbor. And 24 hours later, they were joined by the crippled tanker Ohio, which had survived further savage air attacks. Her vital fuel and the supplies from the freighters ensured that Malta could fight on for another 2 months. Captain Mason